Clara May Duval paused on the staircase. Landing barefoot, one hand resting against the carved banister, the other curled protectively over the small swell of her belly. From down the hallway, her husband's voice floated through the half-closed door of his study. Warm, polished, deliberate. The same voice that once made her laugh across hospital corridors and whispered promises into her ear under magnolia trees. Now it was wrapped in caution. "I told you not on the main line," Preston said. "I'll call back." There was a pause, then a faint feminine laugh. Confident, light as chiffon. "You're late to grow a conscience, Preston." A click. Silence again. The house around Clara hummed with its usual nighttime rhythm, the low thrum of the wine cooler, the hum of the hallway light dimmer, the distant purr of a passing car on East Bay Street. Charleston's historic homes didn't sleep so much as they murmured, like they were always listening. So was she. 30 seconds later, the second phone rang. She didn't have to see it to know. Preston's other phone had a different tone. Lower, more clipped, never answered in front of her. Clara descended one step, heart pounding not in panic, but in recognition. Patterns were forming. Words unspoken began stacking themselves like bricks in her mind. The second call was short. "She signs tomorrow," the woman's voice said. "If she won't, we have options." Preston didn't argue. He simply replied, "Understood." The call ended. No raised voices, no dramatic whispers, just the finality of two people deciding someone else's fate like it was a business deal. Clara's hand slipped from the rail. She sat down slowly, her back resting against the cool wooden paneling. The quiet of the house folded around her like a veil heavy with knowing. This was what betrayal looked like in expensive homes. No shouting, no slammed doors, just carefully worded arrangements and timed conversations routed through untraceable lines. She pulled in a slow breath. The baby shifted just a flutter, but it was enough to center her. She placed her hand on the swell of her stomach and whispered, "We heard that, and we're not going to pretend we didn't." She thought back to when she first met Preston Duval III, a fundraiser at the Children's Hospital. She was working the event as a nurse liaison, balancing a clipboard in one hand and a ginger ale in the other. He'd been charming attentive, offering not just flirtation, but a sense of vision. A future where she wouldn't have to check her bank account before buying groceries. A life wrapped in elegance. She had never asked for luxury. But once it wrapped around her, it was hard to tell where comfort ended and silence began. Her phone buzzed beside her. A text from her mother, Lenora, just checking in. "Don't forget your iron." Clara didn't reply. Upstairs, the study door creaked open. She stood, quickly moved into the shadows of the kitchen glass of water, in hand as camouflage. Preston appeared freshly composed, white dress shirt sleeves rolled just enough to look casual. Face calm, the way only practiced men in power could achieve. "You're up," he said, voice smooth warm. "Can't sleep." She held up the glass. "Heartburn." The usual. He moved toward her, smile polite. His gaze flicked just once toward the study door behind him. She caught it. So did her stomach. Clara took a sip of water, eyes never leaving his. "You've been working late a lot. Prepping for the summit," he said. "Port contracts, shipping lanes. Boring stuff." "And the woman?" He blinked. "What woman?" "The one with the laugh like crystal." "Celeste." He didn't flinch, but his next breath came slower. "She's a consultant. Media strategy, that's all." "She wants me out of the way," Clara said quietly. Preston set his hands on the edge of the marble counter, leaned in slightly. "Clara, don't let your imagination ruin this moment. You're tired. It's been a long trimester." "I'm tired," she agreed. "But not from pregnancy. I'm tired of pretending not to know what I already do." He said nothing. In the silence, she studied the man she married. Sharp jawline, southern manners, the kind of face that looked clean in photographs. She remembered when he used to read the margins of her nursing textbooks just to ask better questions. That man had become rare. "I want to believe you," she said. "But tonight you spoke to someone about options. If I don't sign something tomorrow—" Preston opened his mouth, then closed it again. A flicker of something crossed his face. Guilt, maybe. Or regret. Clara reached for the small dish where her prenatal vitamins sat beside the toaster. She placed her wedding ring there silently. "You're not ready to tell the truth," she said, "and I'm not ready to be erased." She turned to leave the kitchen. "Clara," his voice cracked just once, "you're not in danger." She looked over her shoulder. "Not yet," she said. "But I've lived in Charleston long enough to know danger isn't always loud. Sometimes it just sends papers in an envelope." She walked upstairs slowly, not with drama, but with precision, with clarity. Back in their bedroom, she sat on the edge of the mattress and opened her journal. Pages mostly blank, she hadn't known what to say for weeks. But tonight her pen moved easily. If a child is born into silence, they'll grow into it. I won't let that happen. She closed the journal, pulled her small suitcase from the back of the closet, packed what she needed, nothing more. No confrontation, no goodbye. Just a decision carefully made between the first ring and the second. Because silence can be a weapon, but it can also be a strategy. If you enjoyed this video, comment 1 to let me know. If not, comment 2. Your thought matter to me either way. The Duval estate sat just off Montague Street behind gates no one ever locked, because wealth, true old Charleston wealth, didn't advertise fear. It whispered legacy. It wore magnolia blooms and preservation plaques like armor. The morning after Clara left, sunlight spilled into the foyer, through arched windows glinting off the antique silver tray where her phone and wedding ring now rested side by side, untouched. House staff moved quietly as trained. Breakfast was laid out precisely, linen napkins folded like invitations. But the air was different, still too still. Preston stood at the edge of the dining room, eyes on the empty chair she always used. Her teacup, faintly stained from habit, hadn't been moved. Something about that felt louder than a scream. "She didn't pack much," Wallace said gently from the hallway. Preston turned slightly. "You noticed?" The old butler nodded once. "I noticed everything. Been with this family since your grandfather courted Miss Evelyn over gardenia clippings." Preston's jaw twitched. "She's pregnant, Wallace. She wouldn't just walk out." Wallace gave him a long, slow look. "Depends on what she heard before she did." Preston said nothing, just turned back to the chair and sat down, more tired than he expected to feel at 9 a.m. At that same hour, Clara May Duval sat at a weathered oak table in a quiet guest house 3 towns away, tucked behind a Methodist church, where time moved slower and the sea was always somewhere nearby. The air here smelled like salt and wood polish. She liked that. It felt like a place where women could rebuild. She sipped lukewarm decaf and rubbed her thumb over the smooth curve of her belly. 7 months. He kicked once, small, soft, like a nudge, saying, "Keep going, Mama." "Miss Clara." The voice came from the hallway, gentle, curious. Clara turned to see Miss Geneva, the innkeeper. In her 60s, long gray braids pulled into a low knot, she'd offered the room with no questions. Just a glance at Clara's face, and a nod that said, "You're safe here. Your friend from Atlanta called. Said she'll be in by lunch." Clara nodded. "Thank you." Miss Geneva stepped inside, paused at the bookshelf. "My husband used to say, you can't stop the tide, but you can choose where to stand." I always thought that was about the sea. She looked up. Now I think it was about people. Clara gave her a soft smile. I think I've been standing in the wrong place for a long time. No, Miss Geneva said. You were just waiting for the tide to turn. By noon, Desiree Vaughn arrived in a cloud of road dust and perfume, her dark curls piled high, her briefcase slung over one shoulder like a weapon. She swept into the room like she owned it, dropped her sunglasses on the table, and stared at Clara. Tell me everything. Clara exhaled slowly, then began. The phone calls, the whispers, the contract she found once half buried beneath a folder in Preston's office. Words like revocation custodial agreement, post-nuptial adjustment. The second phone. Celeste. When she finished, Desiree leaned back, eyes sharp. He's not stupid. He wouldn't try to physically force you, but emotionally, financially, he's got the tools. And he thinks silence is the same thing as consent. Clara's voice trembled, not from fear, but from fury. He was going to ask me to sign something, probably at a doctor's visit, maybe a lunch with witnesses. Make it look normal. Desiree opened her case and pulled out a legal pad. Okay, then we stop the performance. From now on, you document everything. Every phone call, every person you speak to. If you can remember timestamps from the last week, write them down. We're not building an escape. We're building a defense. Clara's eyes welled up, but she blinked them clear. Do I need to fight him? No, Desiree said. You just need to be the one telling the truth first. Later that evening, the sun spilled gold across the marsh. Clara sat on the back porch journal, open pen hovering. It wasn't the words that were hard, it was starting. She wrote, It's strange how silence can roar. I lived beside a man who never raised his voice, but his absence filled entire rooms. He held doors open but closed conversations. He kissed my forehead but never asked what I feared. And somehow I believed that was love. She closed the book gently. Inside the estate, Preston stared at a photograph on the piano. Their wedding day. Clara barefoot on the dock, wind in her hair, laughing at something only he had heard, back when everything felt like promise. Sir Preston turned to see Jeremiah Boone in the doorway, broad-shouldered, calm-eyed, the kind of man who read the room before he spoke. We've got press inquiries. One station's asking about a private retreat. Want to confirm if it's true. Preston hesitated. Say she's fine. Say she needed rest. Jeremiah didn't move. Is that true? Preston looked away. Jeremiah stepped into the room. I worked 2 tours overseas, learned how to see things people hide. Sir, with respect, this doesn't feel like retreat. It feels like escape. Preston said nothing. Jeremiah continued slower now. If she left, it wasn't because she's weak. And if she stays gone, it won't be because she doesn't love you. It'll be because she finally remembered to love herself. Preston's jaw tightened. She has everything she could ever want. Jeremiah met his gaze evenly, except trust. Back at the guest house, Clara felt the baby turn again, soft but firm. She smiled and whispered, I know. We're not done. We're just getting started. And somewhere across Charleston, the second phone buzzed again, but this time, no one answered. The storm came in slow, the kind that didn't make noise but changed the light. Shadows deepened under the eaves of Miss Geneva's porch, and Clara sat with a blanket across her lap, watching the trees sway like they knew something. She wasn't used to this kind of quiet. At the estate, silence had always been curated, wrapped in classical piano and the clink of crystal. But here it settled around her differently. Honest, unpolished, real. Her phone buzzed once, a new message from Nico Alvarez. He's giving interviews, talking about rest and reflection. No mention of the baby. Clara's throat tightened. She hadn't cried since she left, not really, but that line simple as it was cut close. She typed back. "Can you call me in a bit?" The reply came quickly. "Of course. 10 minutes." She placed the phone on the railing and folded her hands over her stomach. It wasn't just disappointment she felt. It was grief for the version of her life she'd invested in, like it was unshakable. Inside, Desiree was cross-referencing documents on her laptop surrounded by legal pads and peppermint wrappers. Her focus was surgical. But Clara couldn't stare at papers anymore. She needed a voice. The call came as promised. Clara picked up on the first ring. "Hey," Nico said, voice soft, thoughtful. "I'm sorry. I know that message hit hard." Clara exhaled slowly like she had to push the words out. "He's rewriting the story. I'm not even surprised. I just didn't expect it to be so public. So fast." There was a pause on the line, then a faint hum in the background coffee shop noise. A door chime, someone ordering something with oat milk. Nico was always mobile, always somewhere else, but somehow in his voice, he always felt near. "He's keeping it surface level," Nico said, trying to sound dignified. "But he's not fooling everyone. I'm not asking for revenge," Clara said. "I just want the truth to be louder than whatever version he thinks is safer." "It will be," Nico said. "I've seen it happen. But you have to be willing to own it. Publicly." Clara looked out at the horizon, where the marsh kissed the sea in grays and blues. "That's the part I'm still working on." "Start small," he said. "Tell me something you haven't told anyone." Clara hesitated. Her heart picked up like it wanted to run ahead of her mind. "I found the contract," she said, "before I left, folded into a manila envelope tucked under a fake calendar printout in his office. It wasn't even labeled. What did it say that if I signed before the baby was born, I'd waive any claim to the family trust, and that custody would be negotiated separately under board supervision?" Nico was quiet for a moment. Board supervision. She nodded, even though he couldn't see it. The board of Duval Maritime. He was making me a liability on paper, like I was an asset they needed to phase out. "That's not just strategy," Nico said, voice low. "That's narrative management. He's trying to keep shareholders calm. He's also trying to keep me quiet." "Are you?" Clara closed her eyes. The baby shifted again, like punctuation. "No," she said. "I'm not." The line held. There was something in the way Nico breathed, like he didn't want to say the wrong thing. Like he knew the wrong thing wasn't a mistake. It was betrayal, just in softer clothes. "I'm working on a long-form piece," he said finally. "Something bigger than a podcast segment. About how powerful families use Southern charm to hide structural silencing. I want to include you." Clara opened her eyes. "I don't know if I'm ready." "Then we wait," Nico said. "But you have the truth, and I can help you build the scaffolding for when you want to climb out of the shadows." She smiled just a little. That was poetic. "I rehearse," he said, and she could hear the grin in his voice. "Journalists are secretly very dramatic." "Secretly," she teased. He laughed softly, and it landed in her chest like warmth. After they hung up, Clara stayed outside, watching the sky deepen. Clouds stretched like heavy questions, and still the wind stayed gentle. Inside, Desiree called out, "You okay out there?" Clara turned. "Yeah, just remembering how to breathe." Desiree stepped out holding a mug. Ginger tea, Geneva's recipe. Swears by it for everything from pregnancy to heartbreak. Clara took it with a nod of thanks. Desiree studied her. That Nico guy. He's trustworthy, he's careful and kind. And he doesn't push. Desiree lifted a brow. "And he's interested." Clara chuckled. "He's curious. That's his job." Desiree sat on the railing. There's a difference between someone who wants your story and someone who wants your voice. Clara looked at her friend, heart slowing. "You think I can tell the difference? I think you already did," Desiree said. "By choosing to leave." They sat in silence for a while, sipping tea and letting the storm roll in without fear. That night, as Clara climbed into bed, she checked her messages again. Nothing from Preston. Not a single call. Not even a request to talk. But one message waited this time from Wallace. It simply read, "He's meeting with someone tomorrow, someone from New York." The papers are moving. No threats, no noise, just movement behind closed doors. Clara closed her phone, placed it beside her journal, and whispered to the dark, "I see you, Preston. I'm still here. And I will not be invisible." If you enjoyed this video, comment 1 to let me know. If not, comment 2. Your thought mattered to me either way. The rain had passed by morning, but it left behind a hush, a damp, heavy silence that clung to the air like breath on glass. Clara stood barefoot in the doorway of the guest house, watching droplets slide down the screen, as if time itself was slowing. She had barely slept. Her body ached in that specific way it does when your mind runs all night. Thoughts pacing, what-ifs circling. Her hand rested on her belly, protective grounding. The baby shifted again, as if to remind her, "I'm still here. We keep going." Inside, her phone buzzed. One message. "Wallace, they're drafting a joint statement. Preston and Celeste. Public-facing. Committed to privacy and partnership," was in the first draft. Clara's stomach tightened, not from fear, but from insult. A partnership. As if she were a footnote in her own story, as if motherhood could be filed under miscellaneous. She picked up the phone, typed fast. "Clara, send me everything you can. I'm done waiting." Her fingers hovered over Nico's name next. She hesitated, then tapped. "Clara, how fast can you get here?" The reply came instantly. "Nico, 2 hours. Just say the word," she typed back. "Clara word." The emotional switch had flipped. The waiting, the doubt, the quiet observance, it all snapped into a new gear. Clara wasn't running anymore. She was positioning. By the time Nico arrived, Desiree was already dressed in all black hair-wrapped earrings off her "Let's get serious" uniform. He stepped onto the porch, raindrops still caught in his hair, a canvas bag slung over one shoulder. When Clara opened the door, he paused. "You look different," he said. Clara tilted her head. "Tired different, or done being quiet different?" He smiled. Definitely the second. They moved into the sitting room, where Desiree had already cleared the coffee table, replacing magazines with folders, receipts, flash drives, and a slim recorder. "I've got everything organized," Desiree said without looking up. "Financials, marital agreements, or medical rights as a pregnant spouse, and your statement, if you're really ready." "I'm ready," Clara said. "But we're not going to scream. We're going to whisper so loud they can't pretend not to hear." Nico sat across from her recorder between them. "Let's start with your voice, from the beginning. No scripts, just truth." Clara nodded slowly. She glanced at Desiree, then down at her hands, steady now, and began. "I'm Clara May Duval. I was a pediatric nurse before I became a wife, and I was a wife before I stopped recognizing myself in the mirror. I married a man who owns half the shipping lanes on the southeastern seaboard. But I didn't marry his legacy. I married his laugh. I married the version of him that read bedtime stories to his niece, like each one was a sermon. I didn't know that version had an expiration date." Her voice didn't shake. She wasn't reading. She was remembering out loud. "I overheard them. He and Celeste, talking like I was a signature away from disappearing. The kind of vanishing that's polite, sanitized, and fully enforceable. They said things like quiet separation and she'll be taken care of like I was a pet, not a person." She paused, eyes flickering to the window, then back to Nico. "I left before they could hand me a pen." Silence stretched long, thick with tension. Nico leaned forward. What do you want people to understand, Clara? That not all control looks like bruises, she said. Sometimes it wears a Rolex and offers you sparkling water while it rewrites your future. I want women to hear this and recognize the soft betrayal that comes wrapped in white glove charm. Desiree pressed stop on the recorder. That's your open, she said quietly. That's the line that cuts. Clara exhaled suddenly, aware of her heartbeat. It wasn't racing, but it was loud. Nico reached into his bag and pulled out a slim laptop. If you're ready, I can start editing this into something structured, something public. A first-person narrative, maybe paired with audio. You'd have final approval. Clara nodded. Do it! Desiree stood. I'll call Geneva. We're going to need a printer, a scanner, and a pot of strong tea. As the women disappeared into the kitchen, Nico looked at Clara. You sure you're okay with this going wide? Because once it's out there, you don't get to take it back. Clara leaned back against the cushions, one hand still curled around her stomach. I don't want it back, she said. I want it out. Because the people who hide behind polished doors and public grace, they rely on our silence. They depend on our shame. She looked at him directly now, voice low. And I'm not ashamed. I loved him. I believed him. But now I believe myself more. Nico's eyes softened. You're braver than you think. I'm just done pretending I'm not. Later that afternoon, as Nico worked at the dining table and Desiree organized digital files into a shared folder named Operation Magnolia, Clara stood in the hallway holding Preston's second phone. Wallace had sent it wrapped in a tea towel tucked into a shipping box of pralines. She opened the voice memo app. There were 3 recordings. She played the first. Preston. She'll sign. She trusts me. She doesn't want conflict. Celeste. She won't when she finds out the board clause. You're playing with fire, Preston. Preston, no. I'm writing history before she gets the pen. Clara's throat tightened. She played the second. Celeste, again sharper this time. She's smart, smarter than you want to admit. If she finds the contract, if she gets a lawyer. Preston, she won't. She's pregnant, she's tired, and she believes I love her. Clara's hands shook, but not from sorrow, from clarity. She played the third. Preston. We just need 2 more weeks. By the gala, she'll be out of the picture. Quietly. Respectfully. Clara pressed stop. She looked up at her reflection in the hallway mirror. Not a woman unraveling. A woman arriving. She whispered to her reflection voice, steady as a prayer. Not this time. The morning mist rolled in like memory, soft, low, refusing to lift. Clara stood at the edge of the guest house porch, wrapped in a worn cardigan Miss Geneva had left out for her fingers, curled around a mug of lukewarm chamomile. Sleep had come in pieces like a broken plate she kept trying to glue back together. But her mind, that didn't sleep anymore. Not since the recordings. Not since hearing her husband's voice plan the end of their life together, like it was a quarterly meeting. Inside the soft clicks of Desiree's keyboard were steady. Nico had moved his makeshift workstation to the parlor, the walls now lined with note cards, screenshots, color-coded tabs. Operation Magnolia wasn't just a folder anymore. It was a case. A living, breathing counter-narrative. Clara closed her eyes and whispered, You were wrong, Preston. I found the pen. Behind her the door creaked, Nico's voice quiet. Sorry, didn't mean to startle you. She turned. You didn't. He stepped out, holding 2 cups of coffee, offering one like a peace offering, or maybe just something warm to fill the space between them. She accepted it. Their fingers didn't touch, but the moment paused anyway. He looked out toward the marsh voice, lower now. I listened to the recordings again this morning. Clara nodded, her jaw tense. Celeste sounded tired. Not cruel, just complicit. Clara finished, which can be worse. Nico glanced at her. Do you think she'll flip if this goes public? She won't have a choice, Clara said. Not when the board sees what's coming. There was a long, shared silence, not uncomfortable, just full. Then Nico added, You know there's a way to control how the public hears your story without turning it into a headline. Clara lifted an eyebrow. And how's that? You speak it, he said. On record? A long-form interview. Not chopped up for clicks, just you, your voice, your timing. I've already given you everything she said. The recordings, the documents. I'm not talking about evidence. I'm talking about you. His voice carried weight now, not pressure, but possibility. Clara looked at him carefully. Why do you care so much? Nico's answer didn't come fast. He held her gaze, but with a softness that felt earned. Because my mom left my father the same way. Quiet, smart, strategic, and no one ever heard her version. They still think she was the one who broke things. Clara blinked. Her throat tightened. He went on slower. When women disappear, people make up stories to explain it. But when they speak, that's when the truth gets legs. She looked away, blinking harder now. I want to speak, she said, voice low. But I want to speak from strength, not from damage. Nico didn't answer right away. Then he said, Then wait. Speak when you're ready, not a second sooner. Their eyes met again, and this time Clara felt something shift, not romantic, not yet, but trust. The beginning of it. Back inside, Desiree called out, We have a situation. Clara and Nico moved quickly, stepping into the parlor where Desiree stood, holding her phone screen glowing. What is it? Clara asked. Desiree turned the phone around. It was a digital flyer. The Duval Legacy Gala, an evening of restoration and renewal. Preston and Celeste were listed as co-hosts. The date 2 weeks away. The location, the Duval estate. He's reclaiming the narrative, Desiree said flatly, publicly, with you erased. Clara stared at the screen, her face unreadable. I thought he'd lay low longer, Nico muttered. Clara didn't blink. He's not hiding. He's cementing the new image before the baby comes. Before I can speak. Desiree crossed her arms. If he presents a stable front, and she's painted as a distant wife who chose retreat, he wins the board's sympathy, and maybe legal leverage. Clara stepped back, her fingers finding the edge of the table. He's turning our silence into strategy. Her voice wavered just for a breath. Then she stood straighter. Then I need to go, Desiree frowned. Clara. To Charleston, Clara said. Not to confront him. To prepare. To be seen. Nico looked cautious. You sure? She nodded. I won't interrupt the gala. But I'll be close. I'll have my own moment, my own voice. And when they raise their glasses to his legacy, I'll remind them of the truth they tried to bury. Her tone was calm. Chillingly calm. Desiree crossed to her, placed a hand on Clara's shoulder. Then we do this smart. Controlled. I'll book us a rental near the Battery. Quiet but close. Nico added, And I'll set up a private studio, just in case you're ready to record. Clara looked out the window again. The fog had lifted. The marsh glistened. She whispered more to herself than anyone else. I was never the secret. I was the story. And this time, no one tried to correct her. The rental house near the Charleston Battery was quiet, too quiet for a city that lived and breathed with old ghosts and whispered history through its brick-lined streets. Clara stepped inside the cottage, inhaling the soft scent of lavender and old pine. The floor creaked like it had stories to tell. She understood that feeling. A bay window overlooked the harbor. From here you could see the skyline rising just beyond the palms, sharp with steeples and cranes. Restoration and development, the Duval legacy in a single frame. She dropped her overnight bag beside the sofa, her belly pressed forward now unmistakably maternal. She ran her hand along it as if smoothing fabric, but really she was steadying herself. Her due date was creeping closer. But so was something else, something she couldn't name, yet only feel. Desiree was already setting up their temporary command post at the dining table laptop open files, spread out burner phone beside her. She didn't speak much. She didn't have to. Her silence was the kind that worked. Nico arrived minutes later, headphones around his neck camera bag over his shoulder. "Studio's ready," he said, nodding toward the back room. "Soundproofed. Private. You can record when you want." Clara nodded but didn't respond. She walked to the window, eyes scanning the horizon. The gala was 5 days away. 5 days until Preston tried to erase her with smiles and silk tuxedos. "I want to be seen," she said quietly, "before they toast to forgetting me." Nico set his gear down gently. "Then let's plan it right. No chaos, no drama, just precision." She turned to him. "I don't want to crash his event. You don't have to. You just have to exist where he thought you wouldn't." Desiree looked up, sharp as ever. "And I know exactly how. He's booked the historic Redding house next door to the gala venue for press staging and private meetings. It's got a courtyard that backs up to the gala gardens. You show up there dressed in grace, pregnant, calm, composed, and let the whispers do the rest." Clara looked between them. "I thought we were going to fight with facts." "We are," Desiree said. "But facts don't move people. Presence does. And your presence. That's the story." The room fell quiet. Clara finally broke the silence. "Then I'll need a dress." Desiree smiled. "Already called the boutique. They're holding something in your size." Nico glanced up. "You okay with this level of attention?" Clara didn't hesitate. "I gave my silence 12 years. It gave me nothing back." The next day, Clara stood in the softly lit boutique, staring at her reflection. The dress was simple, a deep navy wrap that hugged her gently, not to hide her pregnancy, but to honor it. She turned slightly, examining the way it moved with her body, not against it. The shop owner, Miriam, stepped closer. "It's classic, strong, but soft at the edges." Clara nodded. "That's how I want to walk into that space, like I'm not asking for permission." "You won't have to," Miriam said then, gently added, "Charleston's seen women like you before. The city just forgot how to look at them." Back at the house, Desiree was on the phone with a columnist. She trusted a woman who'd grown up in Charleston and knew exactly how the city liked to dress up its scandals. "I'm not giving you a quote," Desiree said flatly. "I'm giving you a time and place. The woman you thought disappeared will be seen again. You decide if your readers deserve the truth or just another society headline." She hung up, then looked at Clara. "She'll be there. Cameras, too." Clara's stomach twisted, not from fear, but something quieter. A reckoning. That evening she sat in the small recording room Nico had set up. Just her, the mic, and her voice. She stared at the blinking red light for a long moment before speaking. "I'm not the woman they told you I was. I'm not fragile. I'm not reckless. I'm not leaving for silence or scandal. I'm choosing space, because space is where clarity grows." She paused, then continued. "When a man with power decides a woman should step aside, he rarely says it out loud. He lets her feel it. In the invitations that stop coming. In the room she's no longer brought into. In the meetings where her name is mentioned in the past tense." Another pause, longer this time. "But I'm not in the past. I'm in the room again." When she stepped out, Nico was waiting. He didn't speak. He just handed her a glass of water. "Did it feel right?" he asked. Clara nodded, taking a sip. It felt clean, like I left something heavy in there. Good, he said. Then with a softer smile, you're not just telling your truth, you're setting the tone. She looked at him, really looked, and for the first time in weeks her shoulders relaxed. Just slightly. Enough to breathe. Later that night, as the city slept under a canopy of stars, Clara stood on the back porch alone. The baby kicked again, firm sure. She pressed a hand to her belly and whispered, "You'll know who I am. Not because they told you, but because I did." And somewhere inside that quiet promise, the story began to shift. Not in headlines, but in hearts. The afternoon light slipped through the live oaks like liquid gold, dancing across the front steps of the Redding house. Clara stood behind the gauze curtains of the second-story room, her heart beating with the quiet precision of a clock. From where she stood, she could see the sprawling lawn that separated her from the Duval estate, now draped in banners, soft jazz floating into the air, catering staff in black linen darting between cocktail tables. The gala had begun. Clara didn't flinch. Not when she saw the first arrivals. Not when the press started gathering outside the wrought iron gates. Not even when the gleam of Preston's custom silver tie clip caught the light as he exited a black town car with Celeste on his arm. Celeste wore champagne silk and a polished smile. Her hair was coiled into a perfect chignon, and from the outside she looked like someone who belonged. But Clara saw more than that. She saw the tightness in her jaw, the flick of her eyes as cameras clicked, the pause when the flashbulbs hit too fast, too hard. Desiree stepped beside her tablet in hand. "We're synced with the social feeds. Hashtags already trending." Duval legacy. Evening of restoration. Clara smirked faintly. Restoration. As if truth needs furniture polish. Desiree tilted her head. "You ready to go down?" Clara took one last look out the window, then turned. "I was born for this part." By the time she reached the back courtyard, Nico was already in position near the garden wall, camera-trained low, discreet capturing stills that would do more work than words ever could. The courtyard had been transformed into a lush extension of the gala ferns, lining the brick pathway, lanterns suspended from the trees, and quiet string music floating through the hedges. It wasn't the main event, but it was close enough for every whisper, every glance to travel. Clara stepped into the clearing, her navy dress flowing with every step. The moment she appeared, the atmosphere shifted. Subtle but unmistakable. A pair of older women from the Historical Society turned their heads. A younger journalist standing just beyond the boxwood archway lowered her phone in slow disbelief. One of the gala volunteers, barely out of college, gasped, nudging her companion. "That's her," someone murmured. Clara didn't smile. She didn't wave. She simply walked, steady and present like a memory refusing to fade. Preston was inside the main ballroom, giving a short toast when the murmurs reached him. A rustle at the back, a shift in the crowd. His speech faltered for half a breath, then resumed. But Celeste caught it. She leaned in, voice low. "She's here, isn't she?" Preston didn't answer. His eyes had already drifted to the window. He couldn't see Clara, but he felt her. Back outside, Clara settled near the magnolia tree, an old one with thick branches and a history older than the estate itself. Nico approached, giving her a nod. "You just unraveled $10,000 worth of spin with a dress and a 20-foot walk." Clara smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "It's not about the dress." "No," he agreed. "It's about the fact that you're not hiding." She looked towards the estate. "I want him to see what he lost. Not the money, not the legacy. Me. The real me. Desiree joined them holding out a tablet. Your story just published, front page, with the audio clip embedded. Clara hesitated, and the reaction Desiree tilted the screen. Comments rolled in like tidewater. Her voice is calm, but it cuts deep. I thought I knew their story. I didn't. She's not angry. She's free. Clara inhaled slowly. Good. Just then, from the far side of the garden, Wallace appeared, his gray suit understated his presence. Quiet, but solid. He walked straight toward Clara, ignoring the stares, the flickers of recognition. She looked up as he arrived. Ma'am, he said with a nod of respect. He's aware, but he won't come out. Not yet. I didn't expect him to, she said. He needs the curtain more than I ever did. Wallace hesitated. There's more. Clara stood still. The board saw the piece. It's being circulated through their private channel. 2 members have already contacted me privately. They're re-evaluating things. Clara felt the air shift again, not just around her, but within her. Thank you, she said. Wallace looked at her, and for a moment there was something more than loyalty in his gaze. There was pride, and maybe even a little relief. I served this family for 40 years, he said. And today's the first time I feel like I served the right one. He turned and disappeared into the crowd as quietly as he'd arrived. Clara stood in place, fingers grazing her belly. The baby kicked once sharp, certain. Like punctuation. Desiree reached for her phone. Media's asking for a comment. 1 sentence. Clara nodded. Write this down. Desiree raised her brows. Clara's voice was calm. Tell them, I never left the story. I simply stopped waiting for permission to write it. Desiree grinned, typing fast. That'll do it. From the shadows of the Duval estate's 2nd-floor balcony, Preston watched. Eyes narrowed. Jaw clenched. Celeste stood beside him, arms crossed. You think she'll come inside? She asked. Preston didn't answer. Celeste let out a breath. You underestimated her. Still he said nothing. She turned to go, but paused at the doorway. She doesn't need revenge, Preston. That's what makes her dangerous. He stayed behind alone, watching the woman he once owned rewrite every chapter he'd tried to close. Below, Clara stood taller than ever. She wasn't part of the gala. She was the headline. The day after the gala, Charleston buzzed. The society pages were flooded not with the usual velvet gowns or donor lists, but with stills of Clara poised under a magnolia tree, head lifted, belly-full silence, heavy with meaning. Her image had taken root in the public imagination. It wasn't scandal anymore. It was story. And no one could quite agree on what that story was. That mystery only made it louder. In the rental cottage, the morning light spilled through lace curtains brushing across Clara's cheek. She sat in the kitchen cradling a ceramic mug, her bare feet resting on the cool tile floor. Nico sat across from her, scrolling through a flood of media alerts on his tablet. His expression was unreadable. They're calling you the First Lady of Quiet Power, he murmured. Clara raised an eyebrow. Sounds like a fragrance ad. He glanced up the corner of his mouth, twitching. You're trending nationally, not just Charleston, New York, LA. Even some international syndicates picked up the piece. She exhaled slowly. I didn't want to be famous. You're not, Nico said. You're a symbol. People see themselves in you. That's the scary part. Before he could answer, Desiree walked in dressed sharp, holding a sealed manila envelope. We got mail. Clara turned toward her. From Desiree slid it across the table. The Duval family office. Clara stared at it. For a moment, no one moved. Nico leaned forward. Want me to open it? No, Clara said. Her fingers moved slowly across the seam, breaking the glue, pulling out a single page of thick ivory paper. She read it once, then again. Silence stretched. Desiree asked softly, while Clara's voice was level. Preston's lawyer has requested a voluntary conversation about separation terms. Privately, no press, no board, just him and me. Nico leaned back in his chair, rubbing his chin. He's rattled. He should be, Desiree said. Clara folded the letter carefully. He doesn't want a legal war. He wants control back. Quietly. His way. Will you go? Nico asked. Clara stared at the window, the marsh beyond, moving with the wind. Yes. Desiree raised her brows. Alone. No, Clara said, but I'll lead the conversation. Later that afternoon, Clara stood in the marble entryway of the Duval estate, her heart steady. It smelled the same. Wood polish, old money, lemon water and lavender from the housekeeper's touch. Preston entered from the study. His gray suit was immaculate, his expression unreadable. Clara didn't move. I assume you've read the article? He gave a short nod. More than once. I'm sure the board has, too. He didn't deny it. You're not here to threaten me, she said. That much is clear. I'm not, Preston replied. I'm here because we need to speak, without eyes, without spin. She crossed her arms. You had every chance to do that before the meetings, the recordings, the plan. He flinched barely, but enough. I misjudged the moment, he said. And you. Clara let the silence sit between them. She wanted him to hear it. Feel it. Finally, she spoke. You didn't misjudge me. You counted on my silence. Preston looked down for a moment, his voice softer now. I didn't know how to protect everything. The company, the family, you. I thought keeping it clean meant keeping it quiet. Clara's laugh was quiet but sharp. You wanted clean optics, not clean conscience. His eyes flicked up. What do you want, Clara? She stepped forward. I want truth and dignity, not just for me, for this child. Our child. I won't raise them on false stories and Sunday photo ops. He swallowed. You still carry my name. I carry your child. The name is yours. The future is mine. For a long second, he didn't speak. Then will you take the settlement? Clara tilted her head. What I'll take is clarity. I'll set the terms. Not for vengeance, for peace. Preston nodded slowly. Then say them. I don't want the house, Clara said. I don't want a war. I want full medical and custodial autonomy. I want financial protection for the child, trust-based, not leverage-based. And I want no gag orders. Not on me, not on them. He blinked. You think I'd silence my child? She didn't hesitate. Yes, he took a breath, but didn't argue. Clara continued. You may be a Duval in the headlines, but legacy isn't built in articles. It's built in silence, the kind you chose, and the kind I broke. She turned to leave, but paused at the doorway. One more thing? Preston waited. I don't hate you, she said, but I will no longer protect the version of you that hurt me. He didn't follow her out. Back in the car, Clara buckled in slowly. Nico sat beside her in the driver's seat. How did it go? She stared ahead. I told the truth, without shaking. He looked at her carefully. You okay? She nodded. I think, for the first time, I might be. As they pulled away from the estate, Clara looked once in the rearview mirror. The mansion faded, the gates behind her shutting with a soft finality. It wasn't an ending. It was a decision, one she wouldn't undo. The Charleston air was thick with jasmine and whispers. Clara leaned against the wooden railing of the rental cottage's front porch, watching the tide roll in like breath, slow, heavy, rhythmic. The kind of calm that comes not after the storm, but between them. Inside, Nico was on a call with a podcast producer, someone from Atlanta, who'd caught wind of the story and wanted Clara for an exclusive. Clara wasn't ready for that yet. Her voice had power now, yes, but she was still learning how to use it without breaking. She heard the screen door creak open behind her. Desiree's voice followed. Your attorney just confirmed Preston signed the separation agreement. No edits, no pushback. Clara turned her head slightly but said nothing. He's not fighting custody terms, Desiree added. Not even the financial clauses. That's rare. It's not guilt, Clara said quietly. It's calculation. He wants this buried and done. Desiree stepped beside her, folding her arms. Then let him bury it. You're writing something new. Clara's eyes drifted toward the marsh. I'm not just writing a new chapter. I'm burning the old book. Desiree smiled faintly. Then let's light the match. Later that afternoon, Nico joined her in the study. He was wearing his usual neutral tones, something between casual and deliberate. He carried a small black flash drive. I cut together a short version of your interview, he said. Only 3 minutes, just enough to tell the heart of it, not the scandal. The strength. Clara reached out, hesitating slightly before taking it. And what would you do with it? Up to you, he said. But if you let me post it through my channel, it'll hit different. Not as a wife scorned, not as a Duval ex, just as a woman who found her voice. She studied him. And what do you get out of this? Nico's gaze didn't waver. I get to help tell a story that matters, one that doesn't end in flames or silence. Clara turned the flash drive over in her hand. She thought of all the headlines, all the ways women's stories got twisted to fit into narratives they never wrote. Then she looked at Nico. Post it. That night the video went live. Clara sat on the couch, her laptop open beside her, her heartbeat loud in her chest. The footage was quiet, understated, her voice clear, measured. The same clip she'd recorded days ago in that little soundproof room, edited now with soft music, dim lighting, and subtle cuts between her words and images of Charleston's skyline. I stayed silent because I believed dignity was quiet. But silence isn't always strength. Sometimes it's survival, and survival isn't where stories should end. Within 30 minutes, the comments began rolling in. She's not performing, she's living. This is what grace looks like when it refuses to break. Why does this feel like it's all of us? The video hit 1,000 shares before midnight. Clara stared at the screen, her hand resting gently on her belly. The baby kicked again, as if agreeing with the rhythm of her heart. Nico walked in with 2 mugs of tea, setting one beside her without a word. They sat in the dim light, not saying much, until Clara finally asked, Do you ever wonder why people show up for you when you finally stop asking them to? Nico took a sip. Because that's when they know you're standing on your own. She nodded slowly, eyes still on the glowing screen. He doesn't own my story anymore. No, Nico agreed. You do. Just then, Desiree walked in, phone in hand. You've got a message request from Celeste. Clara's eyes lifted. What does she want? Desiree handed her the phone. The message was simple. May I speak with you privately? No lawyers, no drama, just me. There are things you don't know. Clara read it twice. Desiree spoke carefully. Could be a trap. Could be a confession, Nico added. Clara tapped the screen, letting the message sit there like a quiet bell waiting to be rung. I'll meet her, she said. But on my terms. And just like that, another thread pulled tight, another page about to turn. But this time Clara would be the one holding the pen. The cafe was tucked beneath the shade of a moss-draped oak on Broad Street, quiet, familiar, and neutral. Clara chose it intentionally. It wasn't flashy like the rooftop lounges Preston favored, and it wasn't one of the Duval-sponsored approved venues. It was just Charleston warm brick walls, soft jazz humming through old speakers, and the gentle clink of coffee spoons against porcelain. Clara arrived first. She wore soft gray linen hair, swept back no makeup, but a touch of tinted balm. She didn't come to impress. She came to listen, but not blindly. Celeste arrived exactly 5 minutes late. Intentional, Clara thought, just enough to feel in control, not so much as to appear dismissive. Her dress was crisp white, a shade too polished for the humidity, and she held her clutch like it might break. But it was her eyes that Clara noticed. First tired, pulled tight at the corners. Not from sleepless nights, but from too many days, pretending they hadn't happened. They sat opposite each other at a small table near the window, a pot of mint tea already steeping. Clara poured 2 cups without a word. Celeste reached for hers slowly. "Thank you for agreeing to meet." Clara nodded. "You said there were things I didn't know." Celeste looked down, wrapping her hands around the cup. "I wasn't supposed to care." That was the rule. Stay beautiful, stay agreeable, stay out of the deeper rooms. Clara waited. "I started as Preston's publicist," Celeste continued. "You probably already knew that. But you didn't know how often I saw things I wasn't meant to see. Texts, calls, the way he used your name when he wanted to soften a deal. How he'd say, 'My wife believes in this project,' just to lend it moral weight." Clara's jaw tightened, but she didn't interrupt. "I didn't realize I was becoming part of the replacement script until I already was." There it was, the line between affair and arrangement, between ignorance and complicity. Celeste's voice cracked slightly. "But it wasn't until the meeting 6 months ago that I knew the plan, not just to divorce you, to erase you." Clara sat forward, her voice calm but firm. "Erase me," how Celeste hesitated. "There were strategies, stories prepared for the press, that you had health complications, that you'd quietly returned to Virginia to care for a sick relative, that you were overwhelmed with the pregnancy and didn't want the pressure of being a public figure anymore." Clara's throat tightened. "None of it true." "No," Celeste whispered. "None of it. And you just went along with it. I told myself I didn't have a choice, that if I played it safe, maybe I could control the narrative from the inside. But that was a lie." Clara leaned back, slowly exhaling through her nose. "So why now?" Celeste looked her straight in the eye. "Because I watched you stand in that courtyard. Pregnant, poised, unapologetic. And I realized I never had what you had. I had his attention. You had your soul." The cafe noise faded beneath those words. Clara spoke quietly. "You didn't just betray me. You betrayed yourself." "I know." Celeste reached into her bag, pulled out a folder, and slid it across the table. Emails, memos, internal plans from the Duval office, everything prepared for your quiet exit. It's not just about you, Clara. It's about how disposable truth became. Clara opened the folder. Dates, signatures, talking points, proof. "What do you want from me?" she asked. "Nothing," Celeste said. "I just needed you to know that you weren't crazy, that it was real, and I was part of it. And I'm sorry." Clara stared at her, then closed the folder gently. "Apology accepted," she said, at voice steady, but not forgotten. Celeste nodded slowly. "I wouldn't expect it to be." They finished their tea in silence. The air between them wasn't clean, but it was clear. As they stood to leave, Clara paused. "I'm not your redemption arc," she said. "I know," Celeste replied. "But you could be your own." Clara stepped out into the afternoon sun, the folder tucked under her arm, her steps sure. She didn't look back. Later that evening, back at the cottage, Clara spread the documents across the table. Desiree read in silence, her brows furrowed. Nico hovered nearby, arms crossed. "This is gold," Desiree said. "But more than that, it's confirmation. Every doubt erased. It's also a chance, Nico added, to show not just what was done to you, but how you chose to rise above it. Clara looked at the clock. The baby kicked softly. A steady rhythm, like agreement. I want to do one last video, she said. Nico's eyes met hers. Tonight, yes, she said. Before the world turns the page for me. I want to write the end of this chapter myself. Desiree smiled slowly. Let's get the lights. The story wasn't over, but the silence that had been permanently broken. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of the floor fan and the slow click of Nico adjusting the camera lens. It was nearly midnight. Outside, Charleston's streets had settled into their late summer stillness. Inside the cottage, Clara stood in front of a warm, simple backdrop, a bookshelf, a table with a lamp, a small vase of wildflowers. She wore no makeup, just a loose slate blue dress and the natural gravity of a woman who had come full circle. Nico raised a hand. Rolling when you're ready. Clara nodded, took a breath, and looked straight into the lens. My name is Clara May Duval. She began, her voice calm, her hands folded gently on her lap. For a long time I believed silence was strength, that if I endured quietly I was somehow noble. She paused. But silence is not always strength. Sometimes it's fear dressed up in discipline. She looked down, then back up, her eyes bright but steady. I want to talk about erasure, about what it feels like to be rewritten before your story is even finished, about what it's like to carry life inside you while the world politely pretends you've disappeared. A breath. Then I heard the plans. I read the memos. I saw the press kits prepared for my vanishing act. I was meant to become a footnote, a graceful exit, a narrative that fit neatly into someone else's legacy. She leaned in just slightly, the intimacy drawing tighter. But I didn't vanish. I chose to step back, not to disappear, but to remember who I was before I became convenient to someone else's plan. Clara paused. Her hands instinctively moved to her stomach. This child growing inside me. They are not a symbol of loss. They are a beginning. A heartbeat I listened to in the quiet long before the world cared to hear mine. Behind the camera, Nico blinked hard. Even he could feel the weight of each word. I'm not angry, Clara continued. Not anymore. But I am awake, and I've learned that no one gets to draft the final chapter of your story except you. A beat. She let the silence hang there, an invitation, a reckoning. If you've ever been told to smile and stay quiet, if you've ever had to trade your truth for someone else's comfort, you are not alone. And you are not small. She drew a soft breath. My name is Clara May Duval, and I did not disappear. I reclaimed. She nodded gently to Nico. Cut. The room was still. Nico let out a low breath and lowered the camera. That was the one. Clara stepped away, suddenly aware of how much had been released. She sat on the edge of the couch, pressing her palms to her knees. Desiree, who'd been quietly watching from the hallway, spoke up. That video isn't just for views. That's a legacy piece. Clara looked at her. That's why I wanted it to be quiet. No background music, no overlays, just words. Desiree nodded slowly. Then let's make sure it lands right. By sunrise, the video was live. The response was instant, but it wasn't explosive in the usual sense. It wasn't a trending spike. It was a rising tide, women sharing it in private groups, pastors referencing it in sermons, daughters sending it to mothers, mothers sending it to daughters. And quietly behind closed doors, a few board members at Duval Holdings sent Clara messages, short ones. No apologies, just acknowledgments. You were right to speak. This never should have happened. We see you now. Later that day, Clara stepped out onto the back porch, barefoot warm mug in hand. The marsh was hushed. Even the breeze felt reverent. She didn't hear the car pull up at first. Nico tapped on the glass behind her. "You've got a visitor." Clara turned. At the gate stood Wallace, the longtime butler, the one who'd once slipped her peppermint tea during rough mornings, who knew which room creaked the loudest, who had once said without words, "I see you." She opened the screen door. "Wallace," she said softly. He removed his hat, stepping in with the care of someone crossing into sacred ground. "I watched your video this morning," he said. "Twice." Clara smiled gently. "Did it surprise you, no, ma'am?" he said. "It reminded me." She tilted her head. "It reminded me of the woman you were before the estate tried to change you," he said. "And it gave me the courage to retire." Clara blinked. "You're leaving the Duvals. I'm choosing peace," he said. Finally. After 42 years, she swallowed the sudden lump in her throat. "Thank you for telling me." Wallace reached into his coat pocket and handed her a small velvet pouch. This belonged to Miss Duval Preston's grandmother. She told me once to give it to the woman in the family who spoke with more heart than title. Clara opened it slowly. Inside was a delicate locket, worn simple. Inside 2 tiny initials, C.D. Catherine Duval Wallace said. She was the first to marry and not be born into it, just like you. Clara closed the pouch carefully. She fought to keep her own name, too, he added with a quiet smile. She laughed soft and low. "Maybe I'm not rewriting the story. Maybe I'm continuing it." Wallace tipped his hat, eyes kind. "You always were." As he left, Clara returned to the porch, the pouch in hand, the sun climbing higher. She was no longer living in reaction to someone else's edits. This was her turning point, and from here on out, the story would only move forward. On her terms. Clara stood in the nursery, barefoot, on the soft rug, her hand trailing across the edge of the crib she'd assembled with Nico just 2 days before. The room was painted a pale, serene green, the kind that shifts with the light. Morning made it feel hopeful. Evening made it feel sacred. In the corner sat a rocking chair she'd picked up from a local vintage shop, its cushions newly stitched by Desiree, who insisted on stitching strength into every seam. A mobile hung above the crib, made of hand-carved wooden stars and paper cranes. Clara folded herself during her quieter afternoons. Each one held a whispered prayer she hadn't said out loud. The baby wasn't due for another 3 weeks, but Clara had begun preparing for more than just motherhood. She was preparing for the life that came after the spotlight, dimmed, for the echo that would follow her choices. Nico knocked gently on the doorframe, holding his phone. "You might want to see this." Clara turned the air still around her. More press. "Not exactly." He handed her the phone. It was a message. From Preston. Her breath caught just slightly. She read it silently. "Clara, I watched the last video. I've never been more aware of how much I didn't understand. If you're willing, I'd like to meet, not as your ex-husband, just as a man trying to learn how to be a better father, and maybe one day a better person." Clara stood still, fingers tightening slightly on the phone. Desiree, appearing behind Nico, crossed her arms. "That's rich." Clara didn't respond immediately. Her gaze drifted to the crib again, then back to the message. "What do you want to do?" Nico asked. "I want to understand his angle," she said slowly. "But more than that. I want to see if he's capable of growth, not for me, for the child." Desiree tilted her head. "You sure he deserves a seat at that table?" "No," Clara said. "But I'm not doing it for him. I'm doing it because I believe in letting people show you who they are twice if you need to." She handed the phone back. "Set the meeting. Somewhere public, somewhere neutral. 2 days later, they met on the patio of a quiet inn by the water. No press, no cameras, just Clara in a loose ivory dress and a calmness that came from hard-won peace. Preston was already there when she arrived, standing awkwardly near the railing, his hands in his pockets. He looked different. Not thinner, not older, just less certain. Clara sat across from him, her back straight. "You have 10 minutes. Preston nodded. "I understand." He didn't launch into apology. Not immediately. Instead, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a small envelope. "This is for the baby. A letter. Not legal, not strategic. Just honest." Clara didn't touch it yet. "Why now?" Preston exhaled. "Because I spent most of my life chasing image. And when you stepped away, you forced me to face the cost of it. I thought I was protecting the empire. But I wasn't even protecting the people in it." "You mean me," Clara said. "I mean both of you," Preston replied. She studied him for a long moment. "What do you want from me, Preston? To earn visitation. Over time. On your terms. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Clara. I'm asking for the chance to be something better." Clara looked down at the envelope. Her fingers brushed the flap, but she didn't open it. "You were so focused on legacy," she said. "But legacy isn't what you build. It's who remembers you with love." He nodded slowly. "That's what I'm learning." Clara stood. "I don't need you to be perfect. I just need you to show up with honesty. If you can do that, maybe there's a path forward as parents. Nothing more." He stood too. "That's more than I expected. Thank you." As she turned to leave, Preston said quietly, "You made something beautiful out of all of it." Clara paused. "No, Preston. I just stopped letting you make it ugly." Back at the cottage, she finally opened the envelope. Inside was a simple, handwritten note. "To my child, I almost lost the right to know you. If I'm lucky, you'll someday see me, not for what I was, but for how hard I tried to change once I understood what mattered. Your mother is the bravest person I've ever known. I hope I earn the chance to be someone you can respect. Dad." Clara folded it, gently, placed it in a small keepsake box in the nursery, and sat down in the rocking chair. The sun poured in, casting slow-moving shadows across the floor. And for the first time in what felt like forever, she let herself feel still. Not stuck, not paused, still with purpose. The Charleston air carried a hush that evening, as if even the wind understood something sacred was near. Clara stood in the kitchen, rolling her hand over her belly in slow, soothing circles. The baby had been quieter today, still moving, but calm, as though it sensed the shift happening around them. She was due in just over a week, but it wasn't the delivery that had her heart fluttering. It was what came after. Not the pain. The life. Nico was in the next room adjusting the lighting setup for one last interview. This time not Clara's. This time it was Desiree. "You don't want to do it yourself?" he'd asked earlier. Clara had smiled. "People have heard enough from me for now. It's time they hear the wisdom that helped keep me upright." Desiree, ever reluctant, had finally agreed. She wore her sharp navy blazer lipstick 2 shades bolder than usual, and an expression like she was walking into court again. From the kitchen, Clara could hear her voice, calm, direct. When Clara left the estate, she wasn't running. She was rerouting. There's a difference. Sometimes the most powerful thing a woman can do isn't fight. It's step out of the game entirely and write new rules. Clara smiled to herself. That was Desiree's gift truth without performance. No dramatics, just grounded, deliberate grace. The doorbell rang. She wasn't expecting anyone. When she opened it, her breath caught. Lenora stood there clasping her purse with both hands. The matriarch. the Duval name in heels and pearls. Her silver hair was pulled back neat as always. But her eyes, those were different. No longer cool or assessing. Just human. "May I come in?" Lenora asked. Clara nodded and stepped aside. They moved into the parlor, sunlight slipping across the floorboards like memory. "I saw your last post," Lenora said, sitting carefully on the edge of the settee. "And the statement you released with your attorney." Clara sat opposite her. "And I read it all twice," Lenora continued. "Then I read it out loud to myself. And I realized I spent too many years teaching the women in our family how to survive, and not enough teaching them how to live." Clara said nothing. Let the silence speak for her. "I don't expect forgiveness," Lenora added. "But I would like to offer you something. Something not signed in legal ink or written in PR gloss." She reached into her handbag and pulled out an old photograph, sepia-toned, its corners worn. It was of a woman in a wide-brimmed hat standing in front of the original Duval estate, before it was remodeled into its marble perfection. "That's my grandmother," Lenora said. "They tried to push her out when she married in. Said she wasn't born of the right family, but she held the land. Quietly, fiercely. She made it so women could inherit, not just marry well." Clara studied the photo, the posture, the stillness. "She looks like someone who didn't raise her voice but never lowered her gaze," Clara murmured. "Exactly," Lenora said. "She was erased from the plaques, but not from the roots." She handed the photo to Clara. "I'm not giving you the estate," Lenora said, "but I am transferring one of the Charleston properties into your name. Not as an apology, as an acknowledgement. You held more grace under scrutiny than most men in that family ever held under pressure." Clara blinked, surprised. "Why now?" Lenora's voice softened. "Because this child deserves to inherit more than money. They deserve to inherit truth. And a name that means something more than wealth." Clara pressed the photo to her chest for a moment, then looked Lenora square in the eye. "I'll accept it. Not for the value, but for the meaning." Lenora nodded. "That's all I hoped." As Lenora stood to leave, she paused by the door. "You taught this family something none of us were brave enough to say aloud. Power without love is just performance." And then she was gone. That night, Clara sat in the nursery again. The envelope from Preston, the letter from Lenora, the video of Desiree, all threads weaving together. Nico walked in holding his laptop. "You should see this." He turned the screen toward her. The 3-minute video, Clara's first, had crossed 2 million views, but more than that, the comment section had become a tapestry of confessions, testimonies, and quiet thank yous. "I left after 27 years. You gave me language. I showed this to my daughter. She finally understood why I stayed, and why I left. This isn't just Clara's story. It's ours." Clara's hand covered her mouth. "I didn't expect," she whispered. Nico sat beside her. "You didn't do this for expectation. You did it for healing. That's why it's working." A pause. A stillness. Then Clara reached for his hand. "Will you stay through the delivery?" she asked. Nico looked at her, something tender flickering across his expression. "Of course," he said. "As long as you need." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "Not because I can't do it alone, but because I don't have to anymore." Outside, the stars were beginning to show through the Carolina sky. The tide shifted again, as it always did. Quiet, relentless, unseen by most but deeply, undeniably there. And Clara! She was ready. The storm rolled in just after midnight, slow and humming, the kind that didn't ask permission before soaking everything in its path. Raindrops tapped against the nursery window like gentle knuckles, steady and rhythmic. Clara stood in the doorway, hands at her sides, watching the wind stir the magnolia tree just beyond the glass. She wasn't anxious. Not quite. But there was a stillness in her chest that felt too aware, like her whole body knew what was coming, even if her mind hadn't caught up. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was Desiree. "Desiree, everything's set for tomorrow. I'll pick up the paperwork and swing by early." "You okay?" Clara typed back slowly. "Clara. More than okay. Just listening." She didn't elaborate. She didn't need to. Down the hall, Nico was finishing up dishes from their late dinner. The clink of cutlery, the low hum of jazz from the speaker, the scent of lemon from the dish soap. It all felt like life pressing gently forward. Ordinary. Present. He glanced up when she entered the kitchen. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked, drying his hands. Clara leaned against the doorframe. "Too quiet." Nico smiled. "In this house, that's rare." She tilted her head. "Do you ever wonder if the quiet comes right before everything changes?" He walked over, handed her a glass of water. "Sometimes. But I also think the quiet is where the strength grows, where we get ready." She took a sip. Ready feels like a big word. "You've been ready," he said. "You just didn't always believe it." She met his eyes. There it was again, that steadiness in him. He never tried to replace or rescue her. He just stood next to her. That was the difference. They sat together on the old velvet couch, rain sliding down the windows. The baby kicked softly as if checking in. "I don't think I ever told you," Clara said suddenly, her voice low, "that I used to believe love meant endurance." Nico looked over. "And now?" She exhaled. "Now I know love doesn't mean staying. It means choosing, again and again, even when it's hard, especially when it's quiet." He nodded. "Sounds like you taught yourself what some folks spend a lifetime trying to learn." Clara smiled faintly. "And you? What did you believe love was?" He paused, thoughtful. "Before I met you, I thought love was proving you were useful to someone, earning your place in their world. And now I know it's standing beside someone without needing to be the reason they're whole." She looked at him, something in her chest softening even deeper. Not romance, not yet. But trust. And something sacred. Before either could speak again, a soft sound filled the air, a pop, then another. Clara blinked. Was that? Her breath caught as warmth spread across her belly, quick and full. Nico's eyes widened. "Is it?" Clara stood carefully, nodding slowly. "It's time." They moved together without panic, him grabbing the bag she'd packed weeks ago, her calling Desiree, who answered on the second ring. "You ready?" Desiree asked, no surprise in her tone. "More than ready," Clara said, trying to smile through the tremble in her voice. "I'll meet you there," Desiree said. "Go bring that baby into a world you've already started rewriting." Clara hung up, placing a hand on her stomach. The pain hadn't started, but the pressure was real, intimate, commanding. At the hospital, everything moved in slow, certain waves. Nurses smiled gently. Nico stayed just outside the room, respecting her request for space, but never leaving entirely. The contractions came like thunder rolling in across a flat field, predictable, loud, and impossible to ignore. Between the waves, Clara rested, closed her eyes, remembered every moment that led here, the moment she overheard the conversation that shattered her illusion, the long, quiet drive away from the estate, the first night alone in a room too big and too silent. Desiree showing up with soup and strategy, Nico handing her the mic she didn't know she needed, the video, the flood of stories, the tide turning. Each breath was a chapter, each contraction a punctuation mark. And finally, after hours that bent time into something elastic, there it was. A cry. New, clear, alive. The nurse placed the baby in her arms, and for a moment Clara could only stare. The eyes were closed, the lips trembling with that first taste of air, the skin soft and wrinkled like petals too new to the sun. A girl. Tiny. Powerful. Completely hers. Tears slipped down Clara's cheeks, not from pain, not from fear, but from the exact opposite. Nico peeked in, catching her gaze. "She's here," Clara whispered. He stepped inside slowly, quietly. "And she's perfect." Clara looked down at her daughter, the weight of her resting like an anchor that finally tethered her to something real. "Her name is Marin," she said. Nico nodded. "Marin. I like that. It means of the sea," Clara said. "She's made of tides and strength and quiet pull." The nurse came back in, checking vitals. Nico stepped aside, letting Clara and Marin have their moment. As the nurse adjusted the blankets, she smiled. "She's going to change the world." Clara looked down at her daughter. "No," she whispered. "She's going to change herself. And that will be enough." The rain had stopped outside. But inside, something entirely new had begun. The morning sun filtered through the gauzy curtains of Clara's cottage, casting golden lines across the wooden floors. Marin lay curled against her chest, asleep, her breath slow and even. Clara gently rocked back and forth in the same chair she'd picked out before she even knew if she had the strength to do all this on her own. Now she wasn't alone. Not in any way that mattered. Marin stirred her tiny hand, unfurling in sleep, brushing against Clara's collarbone. That small touch anchored something inside her, something steady, something sacred. Outside, Nico was packing the car for their first real outing since the birth. Just a drive down to the coast, nothing extravagant. But it was more than a trip. It was a signal. Life was moving again. Desiree had been by earlier that morning, dropping off a stack of letters from viewers, each envelope filled with stories of women who had seen themselves in Clara's quiet strength. One was from a woman in Kansas who'd left a loveless marriage after 29 years. Another from a college freshman in Atlanta, thanking Clara for showing her what not to settle for. Legacy Desiree had said, handing her the bundle. Not in dollars. In echoes. Now Clara held one of those letters in her hand, unopened, the handwriting slightly shaky. She slipped it from the envelope and read it silently. "I never thought someone like you, wealthy, beautiful, poised, could possibly understand a woman like me. But when I watched you walk away without rage, just with quiet certainty, I cried. Because for the first time, I saw strength that didn't have to roar to be real. Thank you for showing us that leaving can be loving, that healing doesn't always mean returning, that sometimes we end the story not with fireworks but with peace. And that's more than enough." Clara folded the letter carefully, pressed it to her heart, and closed her eyes. A knock came at the door. She smiled softly. "It's open." Preston stepped inside, his posture more relaxed than she'd ever seen. Not the curated, confident stride he once carried. This was different, intentional, humbled. He paused at the sight of Marin, now awake and blinking slowly in her arms. "She's beautiful," he said, voice catching. "She has your calm." Clara looked down at her daughter, then back at him. "She has your eyes." They sat in silence for a moment. Preston cleared his throat. "I got the final documents from the lawyers. The estate's trust adjustments are signed. No conditions, no loopholes. It's all hers when she's ready, on her own terms." Clara nodded. "Thank you. I also spoke with Lenora this week," he added. "She said you gave her back a piece of herself she didn't know was missing." Clara looked out the window, thoughtful. "We're all unlearning something." He hesitated, then asked, "Would you mind if I held her?" Clara looked at Marin, then at Preston. She stood, slowly walked over and placed the baby in his arms, with the quiet confidence of someone who had already decided who she was, mother guide protector. Not from fear, from clarity. Preston cradled Marin carefully, as though the slightest wrong movement would shatter everything. "She's so small," he whispered. Clara smiled, "And yet somehow she holds everything." He looked at her eyes glossed with emotion. "I know we'll never be us again. I wouldn't ask. But if there's a way for me to show up for her, even in small ways, I will." "You will," Clara said. "Because now you understand that showing up isn't about control. It's about presence." Preston nodded, kissed Marin gently on the forehead, then returned her to Clara's arms. As he walked to the door, he turned back once more. "You really did vanish," he said softly, "but not to disappear. You vanished to reappear on your own terms." Clara didn't respond. She didn't need to. After he left, Nico appeared in the doorway, car keys in hand. "You ready?" Clara looked down at Marin nestled against her chest. Almost. She went to her desk and pulled out a sealed envelope, addressed to herself. The one she'd written the night she left the estate. A letter meant for the version of her that hadn't existed yet. She opened it. "If you're reading this, it means you survived the silence. It means you found peace not by shouting, but by choosing. You didn't stay where you were tolerated. You didn't pretend to be small. You waited, you grew, you protected what mattered. And maybe you became the woman you needed to see when you were still trying to remember who you were." Clara folded the letter, put it back in the drawer. Now she was ready. The car ride was quiet at first. Nico drove with one hand, the other resting casually on the gear shift. Clara sat in the back with Marin, who dozed in her car seat, a knitted blanket tucked under her chin. They reached the edge of the coast just as the sun began its slow descent. Clara stepped out, inhaling the salt-laced air. She carried Marin down to the sand, her bare feet sinking slightly with each step. Nico joined them, keeping a respectful distance. Clara stared out at the waves, their rhythm steady, eternal. "This," she whispered to Marin, "this is the sound of change that doesn't ask permission. The tide doesn't wait. It just becomes." Behind her, Nico spoke quietly. "You ever think about what comes next?" Clara turned to him. "I think," she said, "what comes next is whatever we choose. And this time I'm choosing softness without apology, boundaries without bitterness, and love, the kind that doesn't need fixing." Nico nodded. "Then we're right where we're supposed to be." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting everything in amber glow, Clara held her daughter a little tighter. She hadn't just vanished. She'd redefined what it meant to stay. And in doing so, she didn't just reclaim her life. She created one worth passing down.